The dust-choked town of Bitter Creek harbored many dark secrets, but none as lethal as Ember Blackwood. Some say the most dangerous creatures are those that strike without warning, and Ember was about to teach that lesson in blood and gun smoke. This is the story of how the most feared outlaw gang in the Dakota Territory made the fatal mistake of ridiculing a woman whose silent demeanor concealed a past carved from vengeance and legend. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Bitter Creek shimmered like a mirage in the punishing Dakota heat, its weathered buildings stretching long shadows across the hard-packed dirt of Main Street. Most townsfolk had enough sense to seek shelter during these scorching afternoon hours, but Ember Blackwood sat motionless on the worn bench outside Widow Chen's apothecary, her untouched cup of chicory growing cold beside her. Unlike the cowhands and miners who frequented the town's rougher establishments, Ember preferred the quiet dignity of the widow's place. The elderly Chinese woman had come to accept Ember's peculiar ways over the past 4 months, how she always positioned herself facing the door with her back to a wall, how her dark eyes ceaselessly surveyed the street despite appearing lost in thought, and how her right hand never strayed far from the simple leather vest that concealed what hung beneath. Widow Chen's other patrons found Ember's presence unsettling, though none could articulate exactly why. Perhaps it was the way she moved, each gesture precise and fluid, like a mountain lion studying prey. Or maybe it was her eyes, amber-flecked brown, that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, carrying winters of hardship no one dared to uncount. What unnerved them most, however, was her silence. Ember Blackwood had not spoken a single word since arriving in Bitter Creek. She communicated through nods, gestures, and the occasional written note, leading many to believe she was mute, a misconception she never bothered to correct. Marshall. Thorne had raised eyebrows when he pinned a deputy star on a silent woman 3 months back, but none could deny the peace that had settled over Bitter Creek since her arrival. The usual troublemakers seemed to lose their nerve whenever her shadow darkened their path. Even Old Man Jacobs, the town drunk who'd normally pick fights with fence posts, sobered up quickly when Ember's gaze fell upon him. The whispers about her past traveled through town like tumbleweed, each telling different but equally improbable tales. Some claimed she'd ridden with the notorious Cassidy gang before a falling out drove her to solitude. Others swore she was the orphaned daughter of a cavalry officer raised by Lakota hunters who taught her tracking and survival. A few old-timers muttered about a mysterious gunfighter known only as the Phantom, who had disappeared years ago after the Black Canyon massacre, leaving behind nothing but cooling bodies and unanswered questions. Ember never confirmed nor denied any of these stories. Her silence was like the eye of a storm, peaceful yet promising violence for those foolish enough to test its boundaries. The afternoon's quiet shattered as 5 riders thundered into town, their horses' hooves kicking up clouds of amber dust. They wore the distinctive bone-handled knives of the Raven Gang, a band of cutthroats that had been pushing deeper into Dakota Territory with increasing boldness. Their leader, a brute known as Silas the Butcher Harrow, had been testing Marshall Thorne's patience lately, each raid growing more daring than the last. The riders dismounted outside the Iron Horse Saloon, just across from where Ember sat. Their swagger spoke of too much whiskey and the kind of meanness that often led to bloodshed. The tallest of the 5, a man with burned scars covering half his face, spat tobacco juice into the dust and eyed Ember with unconcealed contempt. The deputy's badge pinned to her simple buckskin dress seemed to personally offend him. Widow Chen appeared in her doorway, her aged face creased with concern. "Miss Ember," she spoke softly in her accented English, "perhaps today would be good day to take tea inside." The old woman's hands nervously worked at the jade pendant hanging from her neck, a gift she claimed had been blessed by healers in her homeland. Before Ember could respond, a woman's scream pierced the air from within the iron horse. The sound carried notes of genuine terror that set Ember's jaw tight. She rose with fluid grace, each movement deliberate as a wolf stalking its prey. "Please stay inside, Widow Chen," she wrote quickly on a small slate she carried, her first communication that day. The ancient healer touched Ember's arm, an unusual familiarity from the normally reserved woman. "There are stories," she whispered, her dark eyes intense, "about a gunfighter from years past. They called this one the Phantom because none saw the draw before bullets found their mark." She studied Ember's face intently. "They say the Phantom disappeared after Black Canyon. Some say 20 men died in a single afternoon, each with a single bullet between the eyes." A flicker of something crossed Ember's features, recognition perhaps, or resignation. But before she could respond, more shouts erupted from the saloon, followed by the sound of breaking glass and a man's cruel laughter. Ember gently removed Widow Chen's hand and stepped into the street, the Dakota wind tugging at her raven-black hair that was streaked with a single band of silver despite her. "Youth, time to see if the mute can earn that star," one of the town's drifters called out mockingly from a safe distance, but Ember didn't seem to hear. Her focus had narrowed to the saloon's swinging doors, behind which trouble waited with bone-handled knives and loaded guns. Some said later that they saw her lips move slightly, as if tasting forgotten words, before she crossed the street with the same measured grace she always carried. What happened next would change Bitter Creek forever, though none who witnessed it could agree on exactly how it all unfolded. But everyone remembered the strange calm in Ember's eyes as she pushed through those saloon doors, like a woman walking into her own home, rather than what waited beyond. The afternoon sun hung suspended in the sky, as if even nature held its breath to see what would happen when the silent deputy faced down the Raven Gang. The iron horse's interior fell silent as Ember stepped through the doors, dust motes dancing, in the shafts of afternoon light that pierced the smoky air. The saloon's usual crowd had pressed themselves against the walls, leaving a clear view of the 5 ravens who'd cornered Eliza Barrett, the new schoolteacher, against the bar. The room reeked of spilled whiskey and fear, the floorboards still, wet from overturned bottles. The scarred man held Eliza's wrist in a cruel grip. His reputation preceded him, Caleb Burns Jackson, known for leaving flame scars on those who crossed him before ending their misery. Behind the bar, Thomas Quinn, the owner, lay unconscious, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead where a bottle had struck him. Empty glasses and broken furniture littered the floor, evidence of the Raven's destructive entrance. "Well, ain't this something special?" Burns rasped, his damaged voice sending chills through the onlookers. "Thorne's got himself a mute for a deputy. What's next? Gonna hire blind men to guard the bank?" His companions laughed, but their eyes betrayed a hint of uncertainty as they studied Ember's calm demeanor. Even hardened killers recognized something in her stance that gave them pause. Ember's gaze swept the room, noting positions, angles, distances, habits drilled into her long ago in places she tried to forget. The piano player had frozen mid-note, his hands hovering above the keys, 3 cowhands hunched over their poker game, cards forgotten, while a pair of painted ladies watched from the upper balcony, their practiced smiles replaced by genuine fear. Ember didn't speak. Instead, she reached for her slate, writing a single word in large letters, then turned it for all to see. Leave. The word hung in the air like gun smoke, heavy with unspoken threat. Burns laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin cup. "The lady can't even talk, and she's given orders." He drew himself up to his full height, his duster coat stained with old blood, a testament to countless acts of violence. "Name's Burns Jackson, lady, and you ain't in any position to be making demands." His hand dropped to his holster with practiced arrogance. Unless you're fixin' to draw that iron, I bet you got under that vest. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Ember remained still, her hands hanging loose at her sides. The leather vest shifted slightly in the breeze from the swinging doors, offering glimpses of well-worn gun leather beneath. Eliza Barrett's voice trembled as she spoke, her proper Eastern accent made more pronounced by fear. "Please, Deputy, they said they're going to take me to their camp. Said Silas has been wanting a school teacher to educate his men properly." Tears streaked her face, but her eyes held a desperate courage that spoke of her frontier spirit. "Shut it!" Burns growled, twisting Eliza's arm until she cried out. The sound echoed off the saloon walls like a gunshot. "Now listen here, Deputy. You're going to turn around and walk out that door. Tell Thorne this town belongs to the Ravens. Now, and if he's got any sense, he'll—" The man's words died in his throat as Ember moved. Later, witnesses would argue about what they saw. Some swore she'd drawn and fired in a heartbeat, her movements too fast for mortal sight to follow. Others insisted they never saw her draw at all, the gun simply appearing in her hand as if conjured by dark magic. A few claimed they saw something. Impossible, a woman moving like wind through morning mist, deadly as a rattler's strike. 2 shots rang out, their thunder deafening in the confined space. The sound sent the saloon's ceiling birds scattering in panic, their wings casting chaotic shadows across the scene below. Burns Jackson's gun, half drawn, clattered to the floor. As he stumbled backward, his shoulder blooming red, where Ember's bullet had found its mark with surgical precision. The youngest Raven dropped his weapon with a howl, his gun hand shattered by her second shot. A third Raven managed to clear leather, but Ember was no longer where she had been. Like smoke drifting between shadows, she appeared at his side, her movements carrying an inhuman grace that spoke of years spent dancing with death. The barrel of her Colt pressed against his temple, its metal still warm from the previous shots. The saloon held its collective breath. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft whimpering of Burns Jackson as he clutched his wounded shoulder. Then Ember did something that shocked the room even more than her lightning-fast draw. She spoke. "That's 2 men who live." Her voice was soft, yet carried. To every corner of the room, smooth as aged whiskey, despite months of disuse. "The third choice is yours, mister. But remember—" Her eyes locked with his, and the man saw something there that made his face go pale. "Some ghosts don't stay buried, and some legends don't die easy." The man's gun clattered to the floor. His companions, seeing their advantage lost, raised their hands in surrender. Ember's gaze swept the room once more, finding Eliza. With a slight nod, she indicated the door. The schoolteacher didn't need to be told twice. She hurried across the saloon, giving the Ravens a wide berth. As the town began to gather outside, drawn by the gunshots, Marshal Thorne pushed his way through the swinging doors, shotgun at the ready. He took in the scene with experienced eyes. 2 Ravens wounded, but alive, 3 disarmed, and his silent deputy standing in the center of it all, her gun still drawn, but pointed safely at the floor. "Ember," he said, a question in his voice. She holstered her weapon with a fluid motion that spoke of countless repetitions. "They'll need a doctor," she said simply, her voice strange to Thorne's ears after months of silence. "And a jail cell," as Thorne began directing townspeople to help. "Secure the prisoners." Ember stepped outside into the fading afternoon light. The crowd that had gathered parted before her like water around a stone. Their eyes held a new emotion when they looked at her now, not just unease or curiosity, but something deeper, something like awe. Widow Chen stood waiting on her porch, across the street watching as Ember approached. The old woman's eyes held neither surprise nor shock, only a deep knowing. "So," she said quietly when Ember reached her, "the phantom speaks after all." Ember's hand moved to her vest, an unconscious gesture that spoke volumes. "Some ghosts need to stay silent," she replied, her voice low enough that only the widow could hear. "Until they can't anymore." The sun began to set behind the western hills, casting long shadows across Bitter Creek. Something had changed in the town, a shift as palpable as the coming night. And as darkness fell, whispers of a new story began to spread from saloon to general store, from livery to church steps. The silent deputy had found her voice, and the Raven gang had found something they hadn't counted on. A legend they thought was just a ghost story, wearing a star in a dusty Dakota town. But as Marshal Thorne would soon discover, the Ravens were merely the shadow of a much larger storm heading for Bitter Creek. A storm that had been brewing for years, born in the blood-soaked soil of Black Canyon and nurtured by revenge, greed, and old promises broken. And at its eye stood the butcher himself, Silas Harrow, a man who had very personal reasons to want the Phantom dead, reasons tied to secrets Ember Blackwood had kept buried alongside her voice for far too long. Marshal Thorne's office smelled of gun oil and leather as he studied the telegram in his weathered hands while Ember waited quietly. The afternoon's events at the Iron Horse had spread through Bitter Creek like wildfire, growing more fantastic with each telling. Outside, the setting sun painted the town in shades of blood and gold, casting long shadows through the offices. In grimy windows, 2 shots, Thorne muttered, running a hand through his greying beard. One through the shoulder, one through the hand. No dead bodies. That's either remarkable luck or... He let the thought hang unfinished, studying Ember with new eyes. The light caught the network of silver scars along his knuckles, testament to 30 years of frontier law enforcement. Ember remained by the door, her position offering clear views of both the street and the office's back entrance. Old habits died hard, if they died at all. "You spoke," he said finally, his tone making it neither accusation nor question. "When necessary," Ember replied, her voice still strange to her own ears after so many months of silence, like stretching a muscle long unused. Thorne nodded, setting the telegram down carefully on his desk, which was cluttered with wanted posters and sheriff's notices from across the territory. "Burns Jackson's singing like a canary in his cell," he said. "Trying to bargain information for leniency. Says Silas Harrow's gathering forces at Blackstone Ridge, planning something big." He paused, watching her reaction. "Interesting thing is he claims Harrow's offering a $1,000 bounty specifically for you. Not for me, not for the town, for you." Ember's expression remained neutral, but her fingers brushed unconsciously against her vest, the fabric shifting to reveal glimpses of the twin holsters beneath. "Men like Harrow collect enemies," she said simply. "Not like this." Thorne pulled out a wanted poster from his desk drawer, the paper yellowed at the edges. The sketch showed a figure with features obscured by a broad-brimmed hat, a bandana covering the lower face. But the eyes, the artist had captured something in those eyes that sent a chill down the spine. This circulated 3 years ago after Black Canyon. No name, just the Phantom. 20 men dead in a single afternoon, each killed with a precision most sharpshooters couldn't manage on their best day. The poster hung in the air between them like smoke after a gunfight. The territorial governor buried the story, Thorne continued, said it would cause panic. But those who know, those who were there or heard from those who were, they don't forget. His eyes never left Ember's face. The thing is, nobody ever said if the Phantom was a man or a woman, just that they moved like a ghost and shot like the devil himself. Ember studied the poster with detached interest, though her spine had stiffened imperceptibly. "You have something to ask me, Marshal. Best speak plain. Sunset's coming and I need to make my rounds." Thorne leaned forward, his chair creaking under his weight. The last light through the window cast his face in sharp relief, highlighting old scars and deeper worries. "Most folks don't know this, But before I came to Bitter Creek, I rode with the territorial marshals during the Black Hills Rush. Was just a deputy back then. His eyes never left Ember's face, saw things there, things that haunted men's dreams, including a slaughter at Black Canyon that left 20 members of the Raven Gang dead. Not wounded, not captured, dead. He paused, letting the words sink in, each with a single shot placed with inhuman precision. Ember's silence seemed to fill the room. Outside, a dog barked at shadows, and somewhere in the distance a coyote answered. The street was emptying as townsfolk hurried home, sensing trouble on the wind like cattle before a storm. Thorne continued, his voice dropping lower. The interesting thing is what those men were doing at Black Canyon. They weren't just passing through, they were guarding something or someone. He pulled out another piece of paper. This one, a crudely sketched map. There's an old mining camp there, abandoned after the silver played out, but rumors persisted about a prisoner being kept there, someone important. Ghost stories, Ember murmured, but there was something in her tone, remembrance perhaps, or regret. The shadows in the office grew longer, deeper, like memories best left buried. Every territory has its ghost stories, Marshal. Most ain't worth the breath spent telling them, maybe. Thorne stood slowly, years of frontier life evident in his stiff movements. An old bullet wound in his hip made him favor his right leg, though he tried to hide it. The thing is, I've been hearing rumors lately, rumors I don't much care for about Silas Harrow's real plans. He moved to the window, staring out at the darkening street. Man's been gathering forces, not just common bandits anymore. He's recruiting killers, professionals, building something bigger than just a gang. A flicker of genuine concern crossed Ember's features. How many? 40 men at least, maybe more. And now, with Burns' little scouting party failed, Thorne turned back to face her. Word is, they're planning something big, something that'll make those stage robberies last month look like child's play. Ember processed this information silently, her mind already working through implications. Her fingers traced unconscious patterns on her vest, a habit Thorne had noticed whenever she was deep in thought. There's more, he said finally, pulling another document from his desk. Got word from an old friend in the U.S. Marshal's office. Someone's been asking questions about Black Canyon, about what really happened there, about the day the killing stopped. The last rays of sunlight slipped behind the western mountains, plunging the office into shadow. A lamp flickered on Thorne's desk, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Ember's voice came from the darkness, steady as ever. What kind of questions? About her prisoner who disappeared after the shooting. About 20 men who died protecting whatever was in that mining camp, and about a ledger that went missing the same day, a ledger that held enough secrets to bring down half the territory's most powerful men. Names, dates, bribes paid and received, the kind of information men killed to keep buried. Ember moved to the window, her reflection ghost-like in the darkening glass. The street below was empty now, though lamplight spilled from the Iron Horse, where Thomas Quinn was already telling tales about the afternoon's events. Ghosts don't leave tracks, Marshal, and dead men tell no tales. No, Thorne agreed, lighting a cigar that glowed like a fallen star in the darkness. But sometimes they have brothers who do, like Judge Alistair Kemble, territorial circuit judge, and brother to a certain banker who died at Black Canyon, man who might have owned that missing ledger. Ember's hand moved beneath her vest, an unconscious gesture that spoke volumes. Judge Kemble died last winter, hunting accident as I recall. His protege didn't. Thorne's words landed like bullets. Victor Kemble, young, ambitious, connected to half the powerful families in the territory, and word is he's been spending time with Silas Harrow, providing information, funding and political protection, building something that's starting to look an awful lot like an army. The implications hung heavy in the gathering darkness. The cigar smoke twisted in the air, Like forgotten spirits, Ember finally spoke, her voice carrying echoes of something older, harder. "You're saying this goes beyond simple banditry? That Harrow's building an army for someone with bigger plans, someone looking to settle old scores?" "I'm saying," Thorn chose his words carefully, tapping ash from his cigar, "that maybe the Phantom didn't disappear by accident. Maybe they took something that powerful men want back, something worth building an army to find, something worth killing for." Ember turned from the window, her movements liquid grace in the shadows. The lamp caught her eyes, and for a moment Thorn saw what others had whispered about, something deadly and beautiful, like morning frost on a tombstone. "Ghosts don't have pasts, Marshal. Best remember that." "Everyone has a past, Deputy." Thorn's voice was gentle now. "The question is, when it catches up to you, will you face it alone?" Ember's evening patrol took her past the Iron Horse, where Thomas Quinn was already back behind the bar, a bandage wrapped around his head like a badge of honor. The saloon hummed with excited chatter about the afternoon's events, though conversations fell silent when she passed the windows. Inside, Eliza Barrett sat at a corner table, hands wrapped around an untouched cup of tea, her eyes distant. The schoolteacher had shown unexpected courage during the confrontation. Something about her reminded Ember of another woman, long ago, before Black Canyon, before the Phantom, before silence became her only companion. Word of Ember's display had spread beyond the town limits. 3 riders had already galloped north, presumably to inform Silas Harrow. The desert wind carried whispers of approaching storms, both natural and man-made. Ember counted 6 strangers in town since sundown, all wearing guns and asking questions about the new deputy. Their eyes followed her as she made her rounds, some curious, others calculating, new players entering the game, drawn by rumors of the Phantom's reappearance. Widow Chen waited outside her apothecary, jade pendant glinting in the lamplight. "Miss Ember," she called softly, "perhaps time for evening tea?" Her tone suggested more than a simple invitation. The apothecary's interior was warm, fragrant with exotic herbs and medicines that Widow Chen imported from mysterious sources. The old woman closed the shutters with deliberate care before settling. Across from Ember at a small table, a single oil lamp cast dancing shadows on the painted silk screens decorating the walls. "In my homeland," Widow Chen began, pouring tea with practiced grace, "there are stories of warriors who become legends, who fade into myth like morning mist before the sun." Her dark eyes studied Ember over the rim of her cup. "But sometimes myths return when injustice demands balance be restored." Ember sipped her tea, appreciating its subtle complexity. "You seem to know a great deal about myths, Widow Chen." "I know about the Phantom." The words fell like stones in still water. "About Black Canyon. About the prisoner who disappeared." She set her cup down with precise movements. "And I know about Victor Kemble's true plans for this territory. Kemble will not stop with Bitter Creek. This is just the beginning. With both ledgers, he could control every judge, every marshal, every powerful man from here to the capital." Ember's hand rested on her Colts, the weight familiar as a lover's. "Touch. Then we make sure he never gets them," she said, turning from the window. And Widow Chen caught a glimpse of what others had feared, something ancient and lethal wearing a woman's shape. "Time to remind them why they called me the Phantom." Silas Harrow sat astride his coal-black stallion at the edge of Blackstone Ridge, the moon casting enough light to illuminate the growing camp around him. Campfires dotted the darkness like fallen stars, each surrounded by men whose faces had graced wanted posters across 3 territories, 30 men now, with more arriving hourly, each drawn by the promise of blood and gold. Victor Kemble stood beside his white Arabian, his tailored eastern suit incongruous against the rugged backdrop. His uncle's features lived in his face, but sharper, colder, stripped of any pretense of justice. The silver-headed cane he carried concealed a rapier thin enough to slide between a man's ribs without leaving a mark. A fitting metaphor for how he conducted business. The town must be taken intact, he was saying, his cultured voice carrying across the camp. The ledger is paramount. Everything else is negotiable. And Catherine Blackwood? Silas ran a thumb along the engraved handle of one silver Remington, his voice a gravelled whisper from the same fire that had scarred his brother years before. Is she negotiable too? Kemble's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your personal vendetta is your own affair, Mr. Harrow. Just ensure it doesn't interfere with our larger purpose. He gestured toward Bitter Creek's distant lights. That woman took everything from my uncle, his reputation, his power, his life. The ledger was just the beginning. Daniel Rawlins, Harrow's second-in-command, spat into the flames. Ain't natural, the way she moves. Saw her once, years back, like trying to shoot at smoke. His pockmarked face twisted with memory. Lost 3 good men that day. She's human. Silas's voice carried the edge of an old blade. She bleeds. I've seen it. His hand unconsciously touched a faded scar on his neck, a souvenir from Black Canyon. Tonight, we'll see it again. Back in town, Ember stood in Marshall, Thorne's office, studying a crude map of Bitter Creek spread across his desk. Thomas Quinn had joined them, along with Eliza Barrett and Doc Wilson. Outside, Tommy Hayes organized volunteers to move women and children to the relative safety of the old church. 32 raiders confirmed, Thorne reported, marking positions, with lead shot, plus Kemble and his personal guards, maybe 40 total. He looked up at Ember. Most folks have chosen sides. Those who haven't are either leaving or locking their doors. Town's divided, Quinn added, his bandaged head making him look fiercer rather than wounded. Some say we should give Kemble what he wants. Others, he gestured to the shotgun he'd brought, others remember what happened last time men like him had power here. Ember traced routes through the town with her finger, mind calculating angles, fields of fire, choke points. They'll hit at dawn. Kemble's type loves symbolism. Her voice, now used regularly over the past hours, had grown stronger, more confident. Harrow will lead the first wave. He'll want to prove himself. They'll expect us to concentrate our defense here. Thorne tapped the jailhouse and Marshall's office. But we won't, Eliza Barrett said quietly. The schoolteacher's earlier fear had been replaced by a steel that surprised everyone. Because that's not where the ledger is it? Ember's eyes met hers. No, it's not. Doc Wilson cleared his throat. Widow Chen's had visitors all evening, folks we don't usually see in town. Chinese merchants, travelers, even a few Lakota. His meaning was clear. The old woman's network was mobilizing. Good. Ember moved to the window, watching moonlight paint the streets silver. Kemble thinks this is about power, about control. He doesn't understand. What doesn't he understand? Eliza asked. That it was never about the ledger, it was always about justice, about balance. Ember turned back to the group. And Silas Harrow? What about him? Thorne asked softly. Ember's hand brushed her vest, an unconscious gesture that spoke volumes. Ghosts, the same ones that haunt us all out here. She surveyed the unlikely group, assembled before her. A wounded saloon keeper, a schoolteacher, a doctor, and an aging marshal past his prime. Not the army she would have chosen, but perhaps the one she needed. Get some rest, she said finally. Tomorrow comes early, and it comes bloody. As the others filed out, Thorne held her back. You know Kemble won't stop with just the ledger. He'll want to know everything about Black Canyon, about his uncle's death, about what really happened that day. Let him ask. Ember's voice was soft, but carried the promise of violence. Some answers come in lead. Outside, the wind carried the scent of sage and gun smoke. Ember moved through the darkened streets, checking positions, reinforcing resolve. Widow Chen's visitors had brought more than just information. Rifles appeared in unexpected hands, ammunition was distributed quietly, and barricades rose in strategic locations. At the old church, families huddled together, while Tommy Hayes organized the older boys into messenger runners. Ember watched him work, seeing the shadow of the man he might become. "Your father would be proud," she told him softly, remembering another young man who died at Black Canyon. "Miss Ember." Tommy hesitated, then pressed forward. "The stories they tell about the Phantom, about what happened that day. Were you really raised by Lakota warriors like they say?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Some stories are better left as stories, Tommy." She adjusted his gun belt with practiced hands. "Just remember, aim true and remember what you're fighting for." Back at Blackstone Ridge, Silas Harrow paced like a caged mountain lion. The camp had grown to nearly 50 men now, their campfires dotting the landscape like fallen constellations. "She'll have prepared the town," he said, his voice carrying the edge of obsession. "She always prepares, always plans." "Good." Kemball's smile was cold as mountain frost. "Let her plan, while she fortifies the obvious positions. Our men will come, in through the old mine tunnels. Old surveyor maps show they run right under the town. By the time she realizes her mistake, it will be too late." Silas's hand touched the scar on his neck again. "You don't know her like I do. At Black Canyon, Kemball cut him off. She was alone. Now she faces an army. Even ghosts can be killed, Mr. Harrow, if you know where to shoot." In town, Ember stood atop the Iron Horse's roof, watching the eastern sky lighten almost imperceptibly. Dawn was still hours away, but she could feel it coming, in the wind, in the silence, in the weight of destiny settling around her shoulders like a familiar shawl. The ledger was safe, hidden where Kemball would never think to look. But tonight wasn't about ledgers or secrets or even justice. It was about standing against the tide of darkness that men like Kemball brought with them, about drawing a line in the blood-soaked sand of the frontier and saying, "No more." And if Silas Harrow wanted his ghosts, well, the Phantom knew all about ghosts. Some you fought, some you embraced, and some you became. The wind whispered through Bitter Creek like a prophet's warning, carrying the weight of coming violence. Tomorrow would bring blood and smoke and the settling of old scores, but for now, Ember watched and waited, her hands resting on her Colts, while somewhere in the darkness, destiny loaded its guns. The first hint of trouble came not from the direction Ember expected. Young Tommy Hayes burst into the marshal's office just before midnight, his face pale in the lamplight. "Miss Ember, movement in the old Blackwater mine, men with lanterns, lots of them." Ember's mind raced through implications. The mine tunnels, of course. They ran beneath half the town, abandoned veins of silver that had drawn the first settlers here. She'd studied the old maps in Thorne's office, but hadn't considered. Kemball's cleverer than I gave him credit for. Thorne cursed softly, reaching for his rifle. Those tunnels could bring them up anywhere in town. General store, bank, even the church. He spread a yellowed map across his desk, its corners curling with age. The main shaft comes up behind. The livery stable. Secondary shafts here, here, and here. His finger jabbed at various points. "We'll need to collapse them," Ember said quietly. "All of them." "With what?" "Dynamite's locked in the mining company office and—" Thorne stopped as Ember withdrew several stick-shaped bundles from beneath her vest. "Where did you—" Widow Chen's connections proved useful. Ember's lips curved slightly. "Amazing what can be traded for good tea these days." They work quickly, moving through the sleeping town like shadows. Ember positioned volunteers at key points, while others evacuated buildings near the tunnel exits. The dynamite had to be placed precisely, too shallow, and the tunnels would remain passable, too deep, and they risked destabilizing the entire street. At the livery stable, Ember found Eliza Barrett waiting, a Winchester clutched in trembling hands. "I've been practicing," the school teacher said before Ember could speak. "All evening. I can hit a tin can at 20 paces now." Hoping it won't come to that, Ember showed her how to position herself behind a stack of hay bales. "If it does, aim for the chest, not the head. Bigger target." In the distance, a coyote howled, except it wasn't a coyote. Ember recognized Silas Harrow's signal from Black Canyon. The man had always had a flair for dramatics. "They're ready," Eliza whispered. "In the tunnels." "I can feel it," Ember nodded. "So are we." She touched the detonator in her pocket. "When the shooting starts, stay low. These men, they're not like the ravens you saw before. They're professionals." Doc Wilson appeared from the shadows, his medical bag in one hand, a shotgun in the other. "Got the church basement set up as a field hospital. Widow Chen's lending her girls as nurses." At Ember's raised eyebrow, he shrugged. "They've seen their share of bullet wounds." More signals echoed across the night, coyotes calling to each other, carrying messages only killers would understand. Ember counted them, building a picture of Kemble's forces. They were being surrounded, slowly but surely, like a noose tightening around the town's throat. "Miss Ember," Tommy's voice came from above. He'd taken position in the stable loft. "Riders. Coming in from the east, but they're not ravens." Ember climbed up to look. Through her spyglass, she could make out perhaps a dozen mounted figures approaching silently, their horses' hooves wrapped in cloth to muffle sound. They wore no distinctive markers, carried no visible weapons, but Ember recognized the way they moved. "Professionals indeed," she said softly. "Kemble's personal guards, I'd wager. Ex-army scouts probably, men who kill for money instead of passion." She'd seen their kind before, at Black Canyon and elsewhere, more dangerous than the ravens in some ways. "They'll have a plan." The noose grew tighter, stars wheeling overhead like silent witnesses to what was coming. Ember could feel the tension building, see it in the way Eliza's hands tightened on her rifle, in how Doc Wilson kept checking his medical supplies. A flash of movement caught her eye, a signal mirror catching starlight from the direction of Blackstone Ridge. Silas was getting impatient, eager to start the dance of death he'd been rehearsing since Black Canyon. "It's not about the ledger anymore, is it?" Eliza asked suddenly. "Not really." Ember checked her Colts one final time, an unconscious ritual as familiar as breathing. It never was. Kemble just doesn't know it yet. In the distance, another coyote called, but this time Ember smiled, because it wasn't Harrow's signal. It was Widow Chen's people, positioned in the hills around town. Kemble's army might be larger, but Ember had learned long ago that numbers weren't everything. Sometimes what mattered most was knowing when to be the ghost and when to be the gun. "Remember," Ember instructed her small band of defenders, "if you hear the tunnels being used, give the signal, 3 short whistles." She demonstrated the sound, sharp and clear enough to carry, but not so loud as to give away positions. The dynamite needs to be timed perfectly. Too early, and they'll find another way in. Too late. She didn't need to finish the thought. They all understood the stakes. Through her spyglass, Ember watched Kemble's guards taking positions in the hills, their movements precise, professional. These weren't common bandits, but trained killers. They choose their shots carefully, try to pick off the town's defenders one by one. Ember gathered her volunteers close. "One more thing, Kemble's men will be wearing dark clothes, trying to blend with the night. Ravens wear bone-handled knives. Anyone you see wearing neither, shoot first, ask questions later." Eliza Peterson shivered despite the warm night. "How can you be so calm, knowing what's coming?" Ember's response was interrupted by a sound from below, boots on wooden planks, trying to be quiet, but not quite managing it. Someone was in the stable. Ember motioned for silence, drawing her Colt with fluid grace. A shadow moved between the Stalls? Ember tracked it, waiting. The figure reached the ladder to the hayloft, started to climb. That's far enough. Ember's voice cut through the darkness like a knife. Hands where I can see them. Is that any way to greet an old friend? Catherine. The voice was female, cultured, with an edge of mockery, especially one bearing gifts. Ember's gun didn't waver. Show yourself, Isabel. Isabel Rhodes stepped into a shaft of moonlight, her elegant riding clothes seeming to absorb the darkness. Around her, she wore no visible weapons, but the slight bulge beneath her jacket suggested a shoulder holster. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a severe bun, highlighting sharp cheekbones and eyes that had seen too much. "You're still quick," Isabel said softly. "Still deadly. But are you quick enough to save everyone?" "What do you mean?" Isabel's smile was cold as a snake's. "Kemble's men aren't just in the tunnels, Catherine. They're everywhere, in the shops, the houses, even the church." She looked at Eliza, then back to Ember. "How many innocents will die tonight because you won't give up one little book?" "You were innocent once," Ember replied quietly. "Before Black Canyon, before they killed your father." Something flickered in Isabel's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or memory. "We all were. Then men like Kemble's uncle taught us better." She took a step forward, ignoring Ember's gun. "Join us. Kemble's building something bigger than all of us, a new order for the territory. No more corrupt marshals, no more rich men's justice. Just Kemble's justice." Ember's voice carried decades of bitter experience. "Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Nothing changes except the names on the graves." Isabel's unexpected appearance in the stable changed everything. Ember kept, her gun trained steady, while her mind raced through implications. If Isabel could slip through their defenses so easily, how many others had already infiltrated the town? "He's got men inside the church," Isabel continued, her voice carrying the edge of someone enjoying delivering bad news. "Right now, watching all those brave townsfolk you thought you'd protected. One signal from Kemble and—" She let the threat hang in the air. Ember's finger tightened imperceptibly on the trigger. "Why tell me this?" "Because I want you to understand. When the bleeding starts, when children die tonight, it won't be Kemble's fault. It'll be yours." Isabel moved closer, moonlight catching the silver brooch at her throat. "The ledger, Catherine, that's all he wants. Give it to him and everyone lives. Like my sister would live." Ember's voice carried deadly calm. When Harrow's men have been watching in Mesa Verde?" Something flickered across Isabel's face. Surprise, perhaps. "How did you—" "Widow Chen has better connections than you think." Ember's aim didn't waver. "Tell Kemble his uncle tried threatening my family once. Ask him how that worked out." Eliza Barrett's hands tightened on her rifle, but Isabel ignored her, focused entirely on Ember. "Black Canyon was different. You were younger then, faster, hadn't developed a conscience." Her smile turned cruel. "Hadn't started caring about school teachers and stable boys and old Chinese women." Outside, more coyote calls echoed. Real ones. This time, their howls carrying an edge of nervousness. Animals could sense the coming violence. Ember counted heartbeats, weighing options. If Isabel was here, it meant the main attack wasn't far behind. "You're right about one thing," Ember said finally. "I have changed. I learned that some things matter more than survival." Her free hand moved to her vest. "Like justice, like the truth." Isabel's laugh was bitter as desert wind. "Truth? There's no truth out here, Catherine, just power. Men like Kemble understand that. Why do you think his uncle kept that ledger? Insurance against other powerful men. Protection. Fat lot of good it did him," Eliza muttered, earning a venomous glare from Isabel. "The ledger destroyed him," Isabel snapped. "When it disappeared, everyone assumed he'd lost control. His enemies moved in, stripped him of everything, and his own son—" She stopped, realizing she'd said too much. Ember's eyes narrowed. "His own son. What, Isabel?" But Isabel was already moving, her hands blurring toward her concealed weapon. Ember fired first, her shot deafening in the confined space. Isabel spun, blood blooming on her shoulder, but managed to dive behind a stack of hay bales. Now! Isabel's shout triggered chaos. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, Kemble's infiltrators revealing themselves. Ember grabbed Eliza, pulling her down as bullets splintered the wood around them. "Tommy! The signal!" The stable boy's whistle pierced the night. 3 sharp blasts. Ember slapped the detonator in her pocket. The explosion rocked the town underground. The mine tunnels collapsed, taking several of Kemble's men with them, but Isabel was already gone, leaving only a silver brooch and a spreading bloodstain on the stable floor. "She planned this," Eliza gasped, hands shaking on her rifle. Let herself get shot to trigger the attack early. Ember checked her guns, reloading smoothly. No, she came to talk, to understand. Another explosion rocked the night, Widow Chen's people taking out one of Kemble's sniper positions. But some ghosts can't be talked away. Through the stable's broken window, Ember could see fires starting in town. Kemble's men had emerged from their hiding places, engaging in gun battles with townsfolk and Ember's volunteers. The night was about to become very long and very bloody. What about the church? Eliza's voice trembled. If Isabel was telling the truth, she was. Ember's expression hardened. Which means we know exactly where some of Kemble's men are. She checked her spare ammunition. Time to remind them why they called me the Phantom. The night air filled with gun smoke and screams as Bitter Creek erupted into war, but Ember moved with deadly purpose, her path clear. Sometimes to save a town, you had to become the very thing they feared, a ghost with a loaded gun. Across town, Marshal Thorne faced his own battles. Kemble's men had emerged from their hiding places like snakes from winter dens, turning Bitter Creek's peaceful streets into killing grounds. But Thorne had been a lawman too long to panic. He organized his defenders methodically, turning the jailhouse into a fortress. "They're pushing toward the church," Thomas Quinn reported, ducking as bullets shattered the office windows. "Got at least 15 men moving that way." "She knew," Thorne muttered, firing carefully at a shadow that moved too fast. "Knew they'd try to use the townspeople as leverage." His shot found its mark, and someone screamed in the darkness. At the old church, Doc Wilson had turned the basement into an impromptu hospital. The wounded were already coming in, defenders caught in the initial assault, civilians who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Widow Chen's assistants worked efficiently, their usual fine dresses replaced by practical clothing stained with blood. 5 of Kemble's men, one of the women reported to Doc Wilson, disguised as travelers. "They're upstairs with the townspeople." The doctor's hand tightened on his shotgun. "Can you get word to Ember?" "No need." The voice came from the shadows, making them all jump. Ember materialized like her namesake Phantom, moving with deadly purpose. "Lucy, tend to the wounded." "Doc, get ready for more. The men upstairs," the doctor began. "They're holding. Won't be a problem much longer." Ember checked her Colts one final time. "When you hear the shots, get everyone to the basement. Widow Chen's people will cover the doors." She moved up the stairs like smoke, each step silent as prayer. Through the church's broken windows, she could see fires burning across town. Kemble's men were methodical, she'd give them that. Each blaze strategically placed to draw defenders away from key positions. In the church's main room, 5 men stood among the huddled townspeople. They were good. Their positions covered all angles, their weapons held with professional competence, but they'd never faced someone like her. "Evening, gentlemen," Ember's voice carried through the tense air. "I believe you're in my town." What followed happened so quickly that witnesses later disagreed on the sequence. Ember seemed to flow between the men like water, her guns appearing and disappearing like magic. 5 shots rang out, so close together they sounded like one continuous. Roar! 5 men fell, their weapons unfired. "Get to the basement," Ember ordered the stunned townspeople. "Stay there until I send word." She turned to Tommy Hayes, who looked at her with a mixture of awe and fear. "Watch the door. No one enters without the password." "What's the password?" Tommy asked. Ember smiled grimly. "Phantom!" Outside, the battle for Bitter Creek continued to rage. But something had changed. Word spread through Kemble's men like a chill wind. The Phantom wasn't just a legend. She was death in a buckskin vest, moving through the night like judgment made flesh. And the night was still young. Victor Kemble stood at the edge of Blackstone Ridge, watching Bitter Creek burn. The explosions had taken him by surprise. Ghost Hand Hannah was proving craftier than expected. Behind him, Isabel Rhodes approached, her shoulder crudely bandaged, face pale with pain. "She knows about your father," Isabel reported, her voice tight, "about what really happened to your uncle." Kemble's face hardened in the firelight. "The ledger isn't what matters anymore. She has to die tonight." He turned to his lieutenant, a scarred man in an Army Scout's jacket. "Send in the specialists. I want that church taken." In town, Ember moved between shadows, counting ammunition. 4 shots left in each Colt, 2 spare cylinders in her vest. Not enough for what was coming. She could sense them now, different from the other killers. These moved like she did, quiet as death on a winter morning. "Specialists," she muttered. "Should have known." Widow Chen appeared beside her, silent as smoke. "4 of them. Ex-army like you. They carry the same shadows in their eyes." Ember nodded. Ghost riders, men trained in the same dark art she'd learned, shaped into living weapons during the border wars. "The church will be their target. Kemble's trying to force my hand." "Then perhaps it is time to show him your other." Hand. Widow Chen produced a small package wrapped in red silk. "My connections brought this from your cache in Mesa Verde." Ember unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a 3rd Colt, identical to her pair, but with a mother-of-pearl grip inlaid with a black phantom figure. Her ghost gun. They'd called it in the war. The weapon she'd sworn never to use again after Black Canyon. "Your sister sends her regards," Widow Chen added softly. "Says she's safe, hidden where Kemble's men won't find her." A weight lifted from Ember's shoulders, one less vulnerability to worry about. She loaded the 3rd Colt with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from 100 battles taking over. "They're coming," Tommy Hayes whispered from his lookout position. "Moving like shadows, never seen anything like it. Ember had at Black Canyon." There had been others like her, government men trained in the arts of death. Most died that day, but some had escaped, and now Kemble had found them, bought their loyalty with gold and promises. "Get everyone deeper into the basement," she ordered. "Bar the doors. No matter what you hear, don't open them." Eliza Barrett stepped forward, her schoolteacher demeanor replaced by something harder. "Let me help. I can shoot now. You showed me how." "This isn't about shooting," Ember replied quietly. "What's coming? It's something else, something from before." She checked her guns one final time. "Sometimes to fight shadows, you have to become one." Outside, the specialists were closing in. Ember could feel them, 4 deadly presences moving through the night like hunting wolves. They'd take different approaches, try to trap her between them, standard Ghost Rider tactics. But they'd forgotten something important. Something Kemble should have remembered from Black Canyon. Sometimes the ghost you hunt is hunting you. Ember moved into position, her buckskin vest making her one with the shadows. The 3 Colts felt alive in her hands, eager for what was coming. Behind her, the church stood silent, filled with people depending on her to keep death at bay. "Miss Ember," Tommy called softly, "why'd they really call you the Phantom?" "Was it just because you're fast with a gun?" Ember's smile was cold as moonlight on a tomb. "No, Tommy, it's because when I want to be—" She seemed to fade into darkness, her voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "They never see me before they die." The night held its breath, waiting for the dance of ghosts to begin. The first. Specialist revealed himself at the church's west corner, a shadow darker than the rest. Ember recognized his movement pattern, military precision, every step calculated. His gun would be a custom piece, modified for silent killing. She waited, letting him get closer. These men were different from common killers. They'd expect the obvious moves, the standard counters, so she'd give them something else entirely. The second specialist appeared near the bell tower, moving up the old wooden scaffolding like a spider. The third and fourth were splitting up, trying to flank her. Position, classic Ghost Rider strategy. Divide the target's attention, create multiple threats. Ember touched the phantom engraving on her third Colt, not for luck. Ghost Riders didn't believe in luck, but as a reminder of why she fought, of what happened when good people stood aside. And let darkness win. The first specialist was 15 feet away now, his breathing controlled, his gun ready. Ember could read his intentions in his stance. He'd try for a quick, clean kill. One shot, no sound, no witnesses. He died, never knowing what hit him. Ember's first bullet caught him under the chin. Her second took out the man on the scaffolding. Before he could level his weapon, the shots echoed like thunder in the quiet night. "Ghost hand!" the third specialist called out, his voice carrying the same hard edge as hers. "They said you died at Black Canyon." Many things died at Black Canyon. Ember kept moving, using the church's architecture to mask her position. Honor, justice, good men following bad orders. Kemble's paying gold for your head. The man's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a trick she knew well. More than just gold. Ember tracked his movement by sound, by instinct, by the whisper of cloth against stone. He's offering pardons, clean slates. No such thing as clean slates out here. She sensed him now, closer than he thought. Just blood and lies and men like Kemble trying to buy what can't be bought. Then why fight? Why not just give him what he wants? Ember's laugh was soft as cemetery grass. Because some things matter more than survival. Some lines can't be uncrossed. She sensed him now, 20 feet to her right, behind the old oak tree. You were there, weren't you? Black Canyon, the South Ridge by the mining camp. I remember your voice. The man's tone changed, recognition dawning. You let me live that day. Yes. Ember's voice hardened as her guns found their mark in the darkness. I won't make the same mistake twice. The shots echoed once, then silence fell again. 3 bodies cooling in the night air, 3 more ghosts to haunt the territories. Dreams, but the fourth specialist had vanished like morning mist. Ember reloaded methodically, her movements precise as a ritual. He was good, perhaps the best of the 4. He'd recognized the trap and retreated, likely circling back to report to Kemble. Inside the church, Tommy Hayes waited with the others. When Ember returned, something in her eyes made him step back. He'd seen a legend come to life tonight, watched ghost stories become flesh and blood. But mostly, he'd seen what happened when darkness came to call, and found a darker shadow waiting. News of the specialists' deaths spread through Kemble's forces like poison. These had been his elite killers, men feared throughout the territory. Now they lay cooling in the churchyard, each killed with the same deadly precision that had made the Phantom a legend. Kemble paced near the creek, his elegant suit stained with dust. "She's trying to draw us out," he muttered. "Make us waste resources, expose our positions." Isabel Rhodes watched him with fever-bright eyes, her wounded shoulder making her restless. "Send me in. I know how she thinks, how she moves." "Like you knew at Black Canyon?" Kemble's voice carried an edge. "When she killed 30 men and disappeared with my uncle's ledger that was supposed to be our insurance. That was different. She was different then." Isabel's hand strayed to her wounded shoulder. "She's developed attachments, weaknesses. The schoolteacher, the stable boy, that Chinese woman." Kemble stopped pacing. "Yes, her little network of spies and helpers. Widow Chen's connections have been particularly troublesome. He turned to Silas Harrow, who had been watching silently from the shadows, his silver Remingtons gleaming in the moonlight. "Take your best men. Burn the apothecary. Kill everyone inside." In town, Ember conferenced with Marshal Thorne in the relative safety of the church basement. The initial attack had been repelled, but at a cost. 5 defenders dead, several wounded. Doc Wilson worked tirelessly, aided by Widow Chen's assistance. "Kemble's getting desperate," Thorne observed, cleaning his rifle. "Losing those specialists. Hit him hard. He'll try something dramatic now." Ember nodded. "He'll target what he thinks are my weaknesses. Try to draw me out." Her eyes narrowed. "The apothecary. Widow Chen." As if summoned by her words, Tommy Hayes burst in. "Raiders heading for the apothecary, at least 20 of them, led by Silas Harrow himself." Ember checked her guns, the 3 Colts gleaming in the lamplight. "They think they're hunting us," she said softly. "Time to show them what real hunting looks like." But Eliza Barrett grabbed her arm. "Wait, there's something you need to know. Something Widow Chen told me to tell you if things got bad." She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "The Black Book. It's not just a copy of Kemble's ledger. It's proof that Victor Kemble murdered his own father." Ember went very still. "What?" "That's why he really wants it. The old judge didn't die in a hunting accident. His son arranged it after learning his father was planning to turn state's evidence. The ledger was just an excuse. The pieces fell into place in Ember's mind. Kemble's obsession, his desperate need to find both books, his willingness to burn down an entire town. He wasn't just protecting his power, he was covering up patricide. "Does Isabel know?" Ember asked quietly. Eliza shook her head. "Widow Chen doesn't think so. She believes Isabel really thinks she's fighting for justice, for some new order in the territory." Ember's laugh was bitter as trail coffee. "There's no new order coming, just new masters wearing old masks." She checked her ammunition one final time. "Where's the Black Book now?" "Safe," Eliza assured her. "Hidden where even Kemble's men won't think to look." Outside, gunfire erupted from the direction of the apothecary. Ember moved toward the door, but Thorne stopped her. "You know it's a trap," he said quietly. "Of course it is." Ember's smile was cold as mountain frost. "But sometimes the best way to spring a trap is to step right into it. Just make sure you're the one holding the key." She slipped into the night like a ghost, returning to its grave, leaving Thorne and the others to wonder if they'd just seen her for the last time. But Ember's mind was already shifting, changing, becoming what she'd been. At Black Canyon, sometimes to save what you love, you have to become what you fear. The apothecary glowed in the darkness, its paper lanterns casting warm light that belied the violence to come. Ember moved through the shadows, counting heartbeats. Silas Harrow's men had surrounded the building, their torches ready to set it. Ablaze! Through the windows, she could see Widow Chen calmly preparing herbs, seemingly oblivious to the danger. But Ember knew better. The old woman's connections wouldn't have left her unprotected. "Burn it," Harrow's voice carried across the quiet street. "Burn it all." The first torch flew through a window, but something unexpected happened. Instead of catching fire, the paper screens seemed to absorb the flames. Then Ember saw it, the barely visible sheen of water covering everything. Widow Chen had prepared well. "Forget the fire," Harrow roared. "Go in and kill them all." That's when Ember made her move. The 3 Colts appeared in her hands like magic, their reports thunderous in the night air. 3 ravens fell before they knew what hit them. 4 more dropped as they turned to face this new threat. But Silas Harrow was no fool. "It's a trap!" he shouted. "She's trying to draw us away from—" His eyes widened in realization. "The church! Kemble said she'd try to—" His words cut off as arrows began raining from the surrounding rooftops. Widow Chen's real surprise revealed itself, a dozen shadow warriors, their bows singing death into the night. The ravens found themselves caught between Ember's deadly accuracy and this new threat from above. Ghost hand. Harrow's voice carried equal parts fury and fear. You think you're clever? Kemble's already won. Even now, Isabel's leading men to... Ember's bullet caught him in the side, spinning him around. I know, she said quietly. That's exactly what I wanted, because while Kemble's forces focused on the apothecary, other plans were in motion. Sometimes the best way to win wasn't to avoid the trap, but to use it to set a bigger one. The night was about to become very interesting indeed. Isabel Rhodes led a dozen men through Bitter Creek's back alleys, moving with purpose despite her. Wounded shoulder that throbbed with each step. Pain was an old friend by now. The church stood ahead, seemingly undefended after Ember's departure. Remember, she whispered to her chosen killers, the stable boy and the school teacher are mine. Kemble wants the rest alive for questioning. But as they approached the church, something felt wrong. The silence was too complete, the shadows too deep. Isabel's instincts, honed by years of survival, screamed danger. It's too easy, one of her men muttered. The phantom wouldn't leave them unprotected. He was right, of course. As they reached the church steps, the trap revealed itself. Marshal Thorne's voice rang out from the bell tower. Now! Gunfire erupted from every window, every doorway. Not the random shots of frightened townsfolk, but the coordinated volleys of trained shooters. Widow Chen's warriors had been waiting, their rifles speaking death into the night. Isabel dove, for cover cursing. Half her men were down in the first exchange, the others scrambling for protection that didn't exist. She'd walked right into it, exactly as Ember had planned. You think you know her better than anyone, another voice called. Out Eliza Barrett, the schoolteacher. But you never really knew her at all, did you, Isabel? Isabel fired blindly toward the voice, her shots going wide. I know her. I was there at Black Canyon. I saw what she really is. Did you? This voice was new. Widow Chen, calm as a tea. Mountain Lake. Or did you see only what you wanted to see, what Kemble told you to see? More of Isabel's men fell, picked off by invisible shooters. She was alone now, trapped in a killing ground of her own making. But Isabel Rhodes had survived this long by never giving up easily. She broke cover, running for the church doors. If she could get inside, take hostages. Her plans shattered as she found Ember waiting in the doorway, those 3 deadly Colts aimed with lethal precision. Hello, Isabel. Ember's voice carried echoes of Black Canyon. Time we had that talk. You've been avoiding. Isabel raised her gun, but pain and blood loss made her slow. Ember moved like liquid moonlight, disarming her with terrifying ease. Isabel found herself on her knees, looking up at the legend she'd chased for so long. You don't understand, Isabel gasped. Kemble's building something new. Something better. No more corrupt lawmen, no more rich men's justice. No, Ember agreed softly. Just Kemble's justice. She holstered 2 guns, keeping one trained on Isabel. Tell me, Isabel, did you know he killed his own father? Isabel's face went pale. You're lying. The Black Book proves it. The real ledger. The one Widow Chen's husband kept. Every detail, every witness, every piece of blood money Kemble paid to cover it up. Isabel's world was unraveling. He told me, he said his uncle was planning to expose corruption, that you killed him to protect the guilty. Ember reached into her vest and withdrew a small black book. Read it yourself. Your father's name is in here too, on the list of honest men Kemble's uncle had killed, men who wouldn't play along with his schemes. Isabel's hands trembled as she took the book. As she read, tears began falling on the pages. Everything she'd believed, every justification for the blood on her hands crumbled to dust. Why show me this? She whispered finally. Because everyone deserves a chance to choose again. Ember's voice was gentle now. Even ghosts like us. In the distance, explosions lit up the night, Kemble's men engaging with more of Widow Chen's warriors. But here, in this moment, 2 women, who'd walked through hell faced a different kind of reckoning. "What Kemble's building," Ember continued, "it's not justice. It's just another empire built on lies and blood, like his uncle's, like all the others." Isabel looked up, her eyes haunted. "And what are you building, Phantom?" Ember's smile was sad as desert rain. "Nothing. Some of us aren't meant to build. We are meant to tear down what needs tearing down, to stand against the darkness so others can build something better." Behind them, Deputy Wilson called down from his position, "More riders coming!" "Looks like Kemble himself leading at least 20 men. Ember helped Isabel to her feet. "Time to choose, Isabel. The man who killed your father is out there, thinking he owns your loyalty. What are you going to do about it?" Isabel stared, at the black book in her hands, then at the gun Ember had taken from her. Her face hardened with newfound purpose. "Give me back my weapons, even knowing you might use them on me." "You always could read people too well, Catherine." Isabel's smile was bitter but genuine. "Right now, there's only one man I want to kill." Ember returned Isabel's gun. "Some choices you had to make. On faith, even out here where faith was as rare as rain. Kemble will have the apothecary surrounded by now, thinking he's trapped Widow Chen," Ember said. "But that's not where the real trap is it?" Isabel checked her weapon with professional efficiency. "You always were playing a deeper game." Ember's 3 Colts gleamed in the lamplight. "Kemble's uncle taught me that. Always have one more move than they expect. One more card they don't know about." Outside, horses thundered closer. Kemble's voice carried on the wind, issuing orders. He thought he had them cornered, thought his superior numbers would finally overwhelm the legend of the Phantom. But legends, like ghosts, had a way of surprising you. Ember and Isabel moved into position, 2 deadly shadows prepared for what was coming. Sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones you thought you'd tamed. Kemble was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Victor Kemble's attack came like a desert storm, sudden, violent, and overwhelming. His men hit the church from 3 directions, their gunfire shattering windows and splintering wood. But Ember and Isabel were ready, their combined skill turning the church steps into a killing ground. "He'll try to burn us out," Isabel called over the gunfire. Her shots, picking off Kemble's men with lethal precision. "It's what he did in Silver Springs. That's what he expects us to fear." Ember moved like smoke between firing positions, the 3 Colts dealing death with surgical accuracy. But fire's not his real plan. As if confirming her words, a new sound cut through the battle, pickaxes on wood. Kemble's men were attacking the church's foundation while the gunfight distracted the defenders. The tunnels, Ember realized. They're trying to collapse the building into the old mine shafts. Inside, Eliza organized the townspeople, moving them away from the weakening walls. Doc Wilson continued treating the wounded, his hands steady despite the chaos. Tommy Hayes ran messages between defensive positions, showing courage beyond his years. Kemble's voice carried over the mayhem. "It's over, Phantom. You've lost. Give me the ledger, and maybe some of these good people live to see morning." Ember caught Isabel's eye. "Ready to show him how wrong he is?" Isabel checked her ammunition, her face set with deadly purpose born of betrayal. "Born ready." "But Catherine, there's something you should know about your sister in Mesa Verde. She's safe," Ember cut her off. "Widow Chen's people got her out days ago." "No," Isabel's voice carried genuine regret. "Kemble never had men watching her. It was a bluff. He didn't even know you had a sister until I told him. He's been playing you, making you think he has. More reach than he does." Ember absorbed this, her mind racing through implications. If Kemble was bluffing about Rebecca, then her eyes widened. The mine maps, the ones showing tunnels under the town, where did he get them? Isabel's eyes widened in understanding. "From the mining company office, where you stored the dynamite." "Which means," Ember's smile was cold as mountain frost, "he's about to learn a very expensive lesson about trusting old maps." The picking, Sounds grew louder. Kemble's men had reached the church's main support beams, but Ember made no move to stop them, even as dust began falling from the ceiling. "Marshal," she called, "get everyone into the center of the church, away from the walls." Thorn didn't question her, just started moving people. He'd learned to trust Ember's instincts. Outside, Kemble's voice grew more confident with each passing moment. "Your choice, Phantom. The ledger or these people's lives." Ember stepped onto the church porch, seemingly exposed. Her buckskin vest billowed in the gunsmoke like wings of judgment. "You want the ledger, Victor? The one that proves you murdered. Your father, come and get it." Kemble's face, visible in the firelight, twisted with rage. "Kill her, kill them all." But Ember just smiled, because Kemble had forgotten something important about old mining towns, about how the real tunnels were never where the map said they were. The ground began to shake. What happened next would be retold in saloons and around campfires for generations to come. Though none who witnessed it could agree on exactly what they saw, some said the earth itself rose up to punish Kemble's wickedness. Others claimed Widow Chen had summoned ancient spirits to protect the town. The more practical insisted it was, simply old mine shafts collapsing after years of neglect. But everyone remembered the moment when the ground beneath Kemble's men gave way with a roar like thunder. The tunnels they'd been using, the ones on the maps Kemble had stolen, weren't the main shafts at all, but secondary passages riddled with instability. As Kemble's men scrambled to escape the collapsing earth, Ember and Isabel moved in perfect coordination, as if they'd never been enemies. Their gunfire herded the surviving attackers right into the waiting rifles of Thorn and the townspeople. In the chaos, Victor Kemble found himself suddenly alone, his hired army scattered or buried beneath tons of rock and soil. He turned to flee, only to find his path blocked by Silas Harrow, bleeding from the wound Ember had given him, but still very much alive. "Going somewhere, Kemble?" Harrow's voice carried decades of bottled rage. "After all your promises." "This isn't over, Harrow." Kemble's hand moved toward his concealed cane sword. "Step aside. We can still salvage this." "Funny thing about promises," Harrow said, his silver Remingtons gleaming in the pre-dawn light. "I just learned from one of your men that you knew all along who killed my brother at Black Canyon." Kemble's face paled. "What are you talking about?" "It wasn't the Phantom who put a bullet in Daniel's heart." Harrow's eyes narrowed. "It was you, on your uncle's orders, because my brother found out what was really in that ledger." "Lies," Kemble hissed, but his eyes darted from side to side, seeking escape. "Who told you this nonsense?" "The Black Book." Isabel's voice came from behind him. She emerged from the shadows, her gun trained on Kemble's heart. "It has the names of everyone your uncle had killed, and everyone you eliminated to cover his tracks." Kemble lunged, drawing his cane sword with surprising speed. But 3 guns spoke as one, Harrow's silver Remingtons and Isabel's revolver. Victor Kemble collapsed in the dust, his expensive suit blossoming with red, as the dawn broke over Bitter Creek, painting the town in shades of gold and promise. The surviving ravens surrendered or fled. Kemble's mercenaries, seeing their employer dead and their payment gone, vanished like morning mist. And in the quiet that followed violence, Ember Blackwood, the Phantom, stood on the church steps, watching the sunrise with eyes that had seen too much darkness. 3 days later, Ember sat at her usual bench outside Widow Chen's apothecary, a fresh cup of chicory steaming beside her. The town was healing, broken windows replaced, bullet holes patched, the dead buried with honor. Marshal Thorn eased down beside her, his aging bones protesting. "Territorial governor sent a telegram, says he's launching an investigation into Kemble's affairs and his uncle's. Seems that Black Book is stirring up quite the hornet's nest in the capital." Ember nodded, watching Tommy Hayes help repair the church roof. The boy had grown inches in confidence since the battle. "What about Harrow?" she asked. Rode out yesterday with what's left of his ravens. Said something about having scores to settle with certain powerful men named in that book. Thorn studied her profile. Isabel went with him. Good, Ember said simply. Some ghosts need purpose. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the town come back to life around them. Eventually, Thorn cleared his throat. So, Deputy, or should I call you Catherine now? Ember, Catherine, smiled slightly. Ember will do. Catherine, Blackwood died at Black Canyon. Well, Ember then. Thorn fingered his badge thoughtfully. Town council met this morning. They've asked me to offer you the Marshal's Star. Seems they figure having the Phantom wearing the badge might discourage. Further trouble, she raised an eyebrow. And you? I'm getting old, he admitted. It pains me something fierce in the winter. Wouldn't mind advising from a rocking chair for a change. Ember considered this, watching Eliza Barrett lead her students across the street, the children pointing excitedly at the woman who had helped. Save the town. Widow Chen emerged from her shop, nodding respectfully as she passed. I'm not staying, Marshal, Ember said finally. There's too much unfinished business out there. Too many men like Kemble who think they can buy the law, bury the truth. Thorn nodded, unsurprised. Your sister, Rebecca's waiting in Mesa Verde. It's time I stopped running from her too. Ember touched her vest, where the phantom-gripped Colt rested. But I'm leaving something behind. Later that afternoon, Ember stood at the edge of town, her horse packed. For the journey south, Tommy Hayes and Eliza Barrett had come to see her off, along with Doc Wilson and Widow Chen. Will you ever come back? Tommy asked, trying to sound grown-up despite the quaver in his voice. Ember smiled. A real smile this time, not the cold one that preceded violence. Ghosts have a way of returning when they're needed, Tommy. She handed him a small bundle wrapped in soft leather. This is for you, when you're ready. Tommy unwrapped it, his eyes widening at the phantom-gripped Colt inside. Miss Ember, I can't. You can, she said firmly. But remember, a gun doesn't make the law. Justice does. Eliza stepped forward, pressing a book into Ember's hands. Something for the journey. Poetry, to remind you there's beauty in the world, not just darkness. Doc Wilson offered a medical kit, Widow Chen a packet of special tea blends. Small tokens, but heavy with meaning. As Ember mounted her horse, Marshal Thorn approached, leading his own saddled mount. Thought I might ride with you a spell, he said casually. Road to Mesa Verde can be dangerous. Besides, he added with a wink, Rebecca's probably going to need some convincing that her sister's not still that same hot-headed girl who rode off to avenge their parents. Ember laughed, the sound surprising them all, perhaps her most of all. You just want to see if the stories about the orphanage are true? Well, Thorn admitted, swinging into his saddle with a grimace. Word is, those children have quite the guardian angel. Figured that might be worth seeing. As they rode out, the rising sun at their backs painting long shadows ahead, Ember felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the weight of the phantom lifting slightly from her shoulders. She wasn't foolish enough to believe she could ever fully escape what Black Canyon had made her, but perhaps there was room for something else alongside it. You know, Thorn said as they crested the first ridge, Bitter Creek shrinking behind them. There's a difference between a ghost and a legend. Ember glanced at him. What's that? Ghosts are trapped by their past. The old Marshal's eyes crinkled at the corners. Legends get to choose their future. The horizon stretched before them, vast and promising as a blank page. And for the first time since a young woman named Catherine Blackwood had picked up a gun and become the Phantom, Ember allowed herself to imagine what might be written there. Not an ending. She was too realistic for that. But perhaps, just perhaps, a new chapter. Behind them, Tommy Hayes stood at the edge of town, the phantom-gripped Colt heavy in his hands, watching until the riders disappeared from view. Beside him, Eliza Barrett placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Do you think the stories are true? The boy asked. All of them, about what she did at Black Canyon. Eliza considered this, remembering the woman who had moved like smoke through gunfire to save their lives. "I think, Tommy, that sometimes we need our legends to be a little bigger than life, especially when they remind us that even in the darkest times, someone is willing to stand against the night." As they turned back toward town, the morning sun caught something Tommy hadn't noticed before, a small engraving on the Colt's barrel, 3 simple words that summed up everything the Phantom had stood for: justice never sleeps. And somewhere on the trail to Mesa Verde, a woman who had been both ghost and legend rode toward tomorrow, 3 words of her own echoing in her mind, not a gunfighter's creed, but a promise to herself and the sister waiting for her return. Some shadows heal. 6 months passed like a dream. The harsh Dakota winter had settled over the territory, transforming Bitter Creek into a snow-dusted haven far removed from the blood-soaked days of summer. Marshal Tommy Hayes, the youngest lawman in territorial history at 17, stood on the jailhouse porch, watching his breath cloud in the frigid morning air. The Phantom-gripped Colt hung heavy on his hip, a constant reminder of responsibilities. Beyond his years, still no sign of those bandits from Eagle Point, Deputy Quinn reported, limping slightly from the old wound he'd received during what folks now called the Phantom Stand. The former saloon-keeper had found his true calling behind a badge. Seems they thought better of testing Bitter Creek's new reputation. Tommy nodded, scanning the empty main street. "Miss Barrett says the stage is due today, first one in 2 weeks since the pass cleared." "Better post some extra men," Quinn suggested. "Been rumors about gold shipments coming through, but both men knew no outlaw crew would dare hit Bitter Creek stage. Not anymore. Not since word had spread across 3 territories about a town protected by the Phantom's legacy." Inside the schoolhouse, Eliza Barrett had expanded beyond teaching letters and figures. The bookshelf behind her desk displayed an impressive collection of law books, gifts from a mysterious benefactor in Mesa Verde. Today's lesson was on territorial statutes, with the older students debating the finer points of justice versus revenge. "Remember," she told them, her voice carrying the quiet authority she'd found during those violent days, "laws without compassion become tyranny. Compassion without law becomes chaos. The balance is where justice lives." Words Ember Blackwood had spoken to her during those long nights planning Bitter Creek's defense. At the edge of town, Widow Chen's apothecary had doubled in size. The reputation of her miracle cures had spread far and wide, though few connected them to the shadowy network of informants and allies that still kept her apprised of threats throughout the territory. Her jade pendant, now joined by a small silver phantom charm, glinted in the winter sunlight as she packaged herbs for a waiting customer. "You'll want to take these with evening tea," she instructed the nervous young man, one of Harrow's former ravens, now riding as a messenger between scattered bands of reformed outlaws who protected remote settlements. "And tell your employer that what he seeks resides in Deadwood, not Cheyenne." The youth nodded, tucking the package carefully into his coat. Another piece moved on the invisible chessboard that stretched across the Dakota territory, a game whose players remained largely unaware of the ancient Chinese woman orchestrating their movements toward a justice many decades in the making. On the wall behind her counter hung a simple charcoal sketch, a woman with wind-blown hair, 3 guns at her side, and eyes that seemed to follow you around the room. No signature marked the drawing, but those who knew recognized the Phantom's likeness, rendered by a skilled hand that had once belonged to a schoolteacher from the east. 200 miles south, in the small settlement of Mesa Verde, Catherine Blackwood stood on the porch of the orphanage she and her sister had built from the ruins of an abandoned mission. 28 children now called it home, many orphaned by the same kind of violence that had once transformed a young woman into the Phantom. "Aunt Catherine," A small girl with copper-colored hair raced across the yard, waving a letter. Ryder. "Brought this. Says it's from up north." Catherine smiled, tousling the child's hair as she took the envelope. The girl, Lily, had arrived 3 months ago, her family killed by renegades. She'd spoken not a word for weeks, until Catherine had sat beside her bed one night and whispered the story of another girl who had lost everything and found her voice again. The letter bore no return address, but Catherine recognized Marshall Thorne's careful handwriting. The old lawman had settled comfortably into his role as the orphanage's grandfather, his weathered hands now more accustomed to carving wooden toys than gripping a rifle. His health had improved remarkably in the clear mountain air. She broke. The seal, scanning the contents quickly. "Rebecca," she called toward the main building, "I need to speak with you." Her sister appeared in the doorway, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. Where Catherine was all sharp angles and watchful eyes, Rebecca Blackwood radiated a steady warmth that drew wounded souls to her like moths to flame. "Is it time?" Rebecca asked, reading her sister's expression with the ease of someone who had spent a lifetime deciphering the subtle shifts in the phantom's composure. Catherine handed her the letter. "Judge Wilkins is dead, murdered in his chambers in Fort Collins." Rebecca skimmed the letter, her expression hardening. "The 6th territorial judge in 4 months, all connected to entries in the Black Book." "Someone's eliminating loose ends," Catherine said quietly. "But it's not Harrow or Isabel. Their targets were on the other side of the territory when Wilkins died." The sisters shared a look heavy with understanding. The network they'd built, Thorne, Widow Chen, Harrow's reformed ravens, and a dozen other unlikely allies, had been tracking a new threat emerging from the shadows of Kemble's fallen empire. Someone more patient, more calculating than Victor had ever been. "The children," Catherine asked, "safe with Clara for the next week?" "I've already arranged it." Rebecca wasn't just the orphanage's heart. She was its tactician, planning for contingencies others couldn't imagine. "The supply wagon leaves for Bitter Creek tomorrow. We could be there in 4 days." Catherine turned toward the mountains, where the first snow had already dusted the peaks. Her hand unconsciously touched her side, where 2 Colts still rode, in hidden holsters. The third, the one with the phantom grip, remained in Bitter Creek, a deliberate decision to leave part of her legend behind. "I never thought it would find us again," she admitted, the words unfamiliar in her mouth. Catherine Blackwood had learned to admit uncertainty since leaving the phantom behind, or trying to. Rebecca's hand found her sister's shoulder. "It never left, Catherine. You just stopped looking for it." As dusk fell over Mesa Verde, 2 women prepared for a journey neither had expected to make. In a small trunk that hadn't been opened since summer, Catherine found her old buckskin vest. The leather, worn but sturdy, Rebecca packed medical supplies with the efficiency of someone who had treated too many gunshot wounds to need instruction. Neither spoke the fear aloud, that the peace they'd built might be as fragile as morning frost under the noon sun. That some ghosts couldn't be outrun, only confronted. The stagecoach rattled into Bitter Creek 3 days later, its arrival marked by excited shouts from Tommy Hayes's younger deputies. The town had changed. New buildings stood where charred ruins had been. The church sported a fresh coat of paint, and a small monument in the square honored those who had fallen during Kemble's attack. "Miss Barrett," Tommy called, hurrying toward the schoolhouse. "They're here!" Eliza Barrett emerged, adjusting her spectacles. The months had transformed her from a timid schoolteacher into a respected voice in town affairs. Her weekly newspaper, the Bitter Creek Justice, circulated as far as Cheyenne. "I'll tell Widow Chen," she said, already moving toward the apothecary. "Have Quinn prepare the meeting room." By nightfall, an unlikely council had gathered in the back room of what once been the Iron Horse Saloon. Marshal Tommy Hayes sat at the head of the table, the phantom-gripped Colt before him. Beside him, Thomas Quinn kept watch at the window. Eliza Barrett arranged maps and documents with practiced precision, while Doc Wilson checked his medical supplies, a habit born of experience. When the door opened to admit Catherine and Rebecca, Blackwood, followed by Marshal Thorne, the room fell silent. The legend had returned, and with her came the weight of unfinished business. Widow Chen was the last to arrive, carrying a leather portfolio that seemed too heavy for her small frame. "I believe," she said without preamble, placing the portfolio on the table, "we have identified our adversary." She withdrew a carefully penned document and several daguerreotypes. Eleanor Kemble, Victor's cousin, Judge Alistair's daughter. Harvard-educated, connections to banking interests in Boston and New York. Catherine studied the image of a severe-looking woman with eyes that reminded her uncomfortably of Victor's calculating gaze. "I've never heard of her." "Few have." Widow Chen continued. "She operated in the shadows of her family's empire, the architect, not the face. My sources indicate she was the true author of the original ledger scheme." Tommy Hayes frowned. "Why surface now? Why not when Kemble was alive?" "Because," Rebecca interjected, "she was playing a longer game. Victor was impulsive, easier to manipulate from behind. His death didn't end her plans, it simplified them." Thorne nodded grimly. "The judges being assassinated, they're not just loose ends. They're being replaced with her people. 3 new appointments already, all with connections to Eastern banking. Interests? She's building her own justice system," Eliza realized. "One judge, one territory at a time." Catherine absorbed this information with the focused intensity that had once made hardened killers step back. "The Black Book is the only evidence connecting her to the original conspiracy," Widow Chen confirmed, "and to her cousin's crimes, which is why she's been eliminating anyone who might have read it," Rebecca added. "Starting with those most directly named." Catherine turned to Tommy Hayes, her gaze falling to the phantom-gripped Colt on the table. "You've kept it clean," she observed. The young marshal straightened. "Yes, ma'am. Never fired it except in practice." "You might need to change that," Catherine said softly. "Eleanor Kemble won't stay in the shadows forever. Not once she learns the phantom has returned to Bitter Creek." Tommy's jaw set with determination. "Then we'll be ready." "No," Catherine corrected, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded a town's defense against impossible odds. "We'll be waiting. There's a difference." As the council continued deep into the night, planning and preparing, Catherine stepped outside for a moment alone. The winter sky above Bitter Creek blazed with stars, cold and distant as memory. She'd told herself the journey was temporary, a brief return to settle old business before retreating back to the peace she'd found in Mesa Verde. But standing here, where the phantom had first emerged from Catherine Blackwood's grief and rage, she felt the familiar weight settling on her shoulders. Some legends couldn't be abandoned, only embraced on different terms. Rebecca joined her, breath clouding in. "The night air. You're not coming back to Mesa Verde when this is finished, are you?" Catherine met her sister's gaze with rare vulnerability. "Would you be disappointed if I didn't?" Rebecca smiled, linking her arm through her sister's. "I'd be disappointed if you tried to be someone you're not." She gestured toward the town, toward Tommy with his 2 heavy responsibilities, toward Eliza crafting justice through words, toward Widow Chen's subtle web of influence. "They've carried your legend forward, each in their own way, but some battles need the original." As they turned back toward the warmth of the council room, Rebecca added softly, "Besides, the children need an aunt who can teach them that sometimes standing against darkness is the purest form of light." Catherine Blackwood, the phantom, looked toward the distant horizon where new threats gathered. But unlike before, she no longer stood alone against the coming storm. Some legends die, Others evolve. The best ones teach others to create their own, and as dawn broke over Bitter Creek, painting the snow-covered buildings in shades of promise and courage, a woman who had been both ghost and guardian allowed herself to believe that perhaps the most important legacy wasn't what the Phantom had destroyed, but what Catherine Blackwood might help build: justice, balance, and somewhere between them, redemption. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.